Welcome to Shake Out Your Sleeves and Go, support for discovering deep joy through the subtle profundity of the Zen way. I'm Dosho, and I'm here today with Charlie Korin Pokorny. Charlie is now the teacher at the co-teacher at the Brooklyn Zen Center, and he also teaches graduate courses at the Institute of Buddhist Studies in Berkeley. Thank you for joining us, Charlie.
Thank you for
Wanna
having me.
anything more than that that would be helpful for our listeners to hear about you?
Sure. Yeah, well, I did koan study and completed that with Daniel Tarano Roshi, and yeah, and yeah, teaching at the Institute of Buddhist Studies. I teach a course on Zen. I sometimes teach a 2 semester overview of the Buddhist tradition. Teach a class. I used to teach a class in ritual practice. I've also taught classes on Buddhist philosophy there. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And you also worked with James Ford for a while. I believe you were in
I
Boston
started
for a
with
while.
yeah, we lived in Cambridge for about a year, and that's where I started koan practice with James Ford.
Oh,
Moved to Sebastopol. Danielle was 2 blocks away, and started just yeah picked up where I left off with him.
uh-huh. And how did you, well, I should say, we're going to be talking about Record of Going Easy Case 12, Dìzàng Planting the Fields. But first, we want to talk a little about how you got into Zen practice and koan practice. So, how did you how did you get into Zen practice? In '91, you must have been a young guy.
Yes, I was 23.
Mm-hmm.
I I usually start my story when I'm like 9 or 10, and I I would I would lie down to sleep at night, and I would be very clear that I was going to die, and I was really disturbed by this. It was really
Mm-hmm.
troubling, and it sometimes would keep me up for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I did
Same
not have a
experience.
oh yeah, yeah, I did not have a religious upbringing. Had no way to deal with that. I talked to my parents about it, and but their responses didn't meet the anxiety, and uh, and so this was kind of always stirring in me, and I found um, I found books on Zen in high school, but they were like D.T. Suzuki and Alan Watts, and they were books that had no instruction on practice, so I didn't practice. I didn't know, I just didn't have any idea about how to start. But I had a kind of I think something by Salinger, some high school English class had Salinger in it. That got me interested in Zen. That led me to the library. Started reading, and then towards the end of college, this started really stirring in me again. I started reading a lot from many traditions, and after I graduated, moved to San Francisco, and knew of San Francisco Zen Center, so knew of this place of practice, and I was going by it on the bus route, and so I was like, oh, once I'm settled, I'm gonna go there, and yeah, and I really I kind of I found this kind of home right away, or this I felt like this is enough. This is, meets me enough, and
How did you connect with Tension Roshi?
well, let's see. So he was at Green Gulch at that time, and he would come. He The first time I heard him teach was at just a Saturday morning talk at City Center at San Francisco Zen Center, and it was just that was the most inspiring talk I'd heard, and so I just felt that connection. He also taught a class in koans, very much like free exposition of the koan, like just like
Mm-hmm.
no like we're just a living kind of springboard the for Dharma, and and I love that class. And
Those were Shoei Roku koans, weren't
yes,
they?
he went
What are
through
they
the whole
called?
book of Serenity over about 20 years.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And yeah, and then wasn't quite ready to go to Tassajara in 1992, and I kind of my time in San Francisco living there, something had to change. So then ended up going to Stanford and getting a master's in religious studies, and went through a lot of doubt, kind of practicing on my own, a lot of academic scholarship, no sangha, and but then became very clear I did want to go to Tassajara, and so I moved there a week after I graduated, and
Mm.
and yeah, and then that was kind of like all she wrote. I mean, I ended up really loving it there, and just wanted to stay as long as my life allowed. And yeah, so that was '94. Moved to Tassajara, um, ordained with as a priest with Reb in '99, and then and I met my partner. We met in '98. We kind of got together in 2000, and then we got married. We had a baby, and when our daughter was 3, we got to a place of we're going to move out of San Francisco Zen Center. We just we just wanted to kind of really be able to give our full attention to family life.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and we moved to Cambridge, and James Ford was teaching in I guess Newton or somewhere
Yeah.
else, somewhere, and so I kind of I had asked Reb, I think even before I left, like I'm thinking about doing some koan practice, and he was like totally fine. And so it was mainly just curiosity. I didn't feel anything really lacking or a deep hole. I just and I kind of had been and I kind of just but I just felt it as a kind of a wonderful compliment to my Soto practice. Yeah, I just kind of always felt it kind of very harmonious with the training and teachings I'd worked with at Tassajara and with Reb, and then into the koan work in Doksan.
Hmm. And what about Kensho? Someone, Jiru, actually, the one of the current abbots. This was before he was abbot, but he said on social media, and I don't forget these kind of things. So he said that his institution, he didn't identify it, but I think he was talking about San Francisco Zen Center, was rabidly anti-Kensho. He said that really kind of, struck me. So
I,
I don't know if you think that's fair, but how do
that
you
was
work?
not my experience. That was not my
Uh,
experience. My experience is that there's just a lot of maybe extreme carefulness around how one might talk about Kensho or an opening, um, and I think partially because of the kind of grasping that you kind of put once you put it out there, it can activate a lot of grasping, in
mhm.
the sangha, and so I think I felt a kind of reticence about it, from that kind of point of view of care. Um, I thought maybe some people also kind of I thought maybe sometimes I maybe felt that like people didn't want to talk about attainments, kind of like to avoid you know like you might deny attainment as a way of avoiding your own disappointment in not having that attainment. And I sometimes felt that energy from some students, and but I never felt that with Rev. I felt like we would have conversations about this, and and about grasping after attainment, and also about being clear about what kind of attainments had happened or not, and
Mhm.
clear, like, and when big things happened in Zazen, what were they? And talking about those in Doksan, and I do feel like kind of to even say something like about Kensho does, like, it starts to trip into things that it's not like that that the actual opening, like, just once anything I might say about the opening is kind of maybe not the opening itself, right? It's something like that's kind of come into it's kind of been resolved post opening, and then there's a story, right? So then it's like it's just a story, right? Like,
Yeah,
um,
but it can be a good story, right? Like
well, you can kind of
Shakyamuni
listen
Buddha under the
if you
Bodhi
listen to
tree.
someone's
We're
story,
still
and
talking about that.
yeah, and you listen to someone's story, and you might hear like, oh, that sounds like a really deep opening, or oh, that sounds like something else.
Yeah.
So that is the stories do reveal stuff. I guess I've come to really feel I and I feel this in Dogen, but I kind of feel like actually like one of the ways people can grasp an opening is make it pivotal in a way that I I don't necessarily kind of too pivotal, maybe, in
Hmm.
that like that the cultivation, the kind of a multidimensional cultivation of character before and after an opening, or make it make it spiritually useful.
Yeah,
And but
that's
on its
right.
own, it could be useless, or it
I
doesn't
agree.
necessarily. It's not transformative on its own. It needs a context, and it needs care, and it
Right.
needs integration, and and
So the checking questions, for instance, in our system,
yeah,
we don't confirm. Just the experience actually
yeah,
isn't what's confirmed. What's
yeah,
confirmed is what you can do with it,
yeah,
right? So the
yeah,
checking process is all about what you can do
yeah,
um,
yeah. I do
with
like the
this
checking questions.
non-dual, awareness that you've discovered.
Yeah,
I'd say too, I think this is at least what I'm hearing. One of the threads there is that Kensho can be overemphasized in the sense that, um, you know, it's still a very initial step on the path, and the
mm,
52 stages of the Bodhisattva career, etc. And actually, very few people probably even get to the first stage of faith,
yeah,
with Kensho or without. So it's, I think that there's something in American Zen and maybe contemporary Zen generally, I don't know. And I think Kapla Roshi, who I think was a wonderful teacher, Three Pillars of Zen was great, but it gave them, I think, could be called a misimpression that Kensho was the same as realizing Buddhahood.
yes, yeah. I have a big problem with that. Yeah, yeah, and I, or even like from the kind of from the early teachings, like stream entry, right? Profound insight into the Four Noble Truths. In my view, like I don't think Kensho is stream entry, or not. I don't I don't think there's very many stream enterers in the world. From that, from think the depth of insight. Um, I think for me, Kensho can it could be much just a more of a glimpse than like a complete the complete insight of stream entry.
Right.
And I do see a pretty big. I I feel like Kensho could be among a long period of warming up towards stream entry.
Yeah, well, as in the 10 ox herding pictures, you can
Yeah,
show maybe the third ox,
yeah,
and Great Awakening would be the eighth or ninth, or however you frame
yeah,
those, but it's later. And I know Yamada Koen Roshi would only talk through, I think, the first six, because he said that's what he'd experienced, and he wouldn't talk beyond his experience, so I think that's so we're of one mind on that point. So let's talk a little. Do we have time? Yeah, let's kind of touch on these things anyway. Something about what you do with koans, and in light of the working within the Soto system, how do you do that?
yeah. Well, I've just offered koans to a few people, so I don't have a lot of koan students. Um, I uh,
How do
actually
you
since
decide who you offer koans to?
are my what?
How do you decide who you would offer a koan to?
Um, I well, at first they have to ask. I don't really put it out there that I do it. So, but if people find out that there's something they can do, they could ask me. And then I tend to feel like I don't want to do this practice with somebody unless they've got a pretty good foundation just in Soto practice. That's or just I would just say that have a very clear sense of being intimate, body and mind, feeling and experience in sitting. And so
So
if they've got a
samadhi.
good, yeah, like a good grounding and intimacy, then I feel like uh, the, they could, I feel okay about koan practice. I feel like before that, I feel like I'd be really concerned about becoming a distraction, or that people could do it from the head up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I usually like multiple years of practice. If I haven't done it with anybody with less than 3 or 4 years of practice for this reason. And at Brooklyn Zen Center, we're still in a. I'm still in. It's still actually I don't do it with anybody at Brooklyn Zen Center right now, and I'm kind of it's sort of a question. And I have gotten one or two requests, and but I think the thing is like it can introduce a culture shift. Like it can be a kind of it's a sort of a different thing,
Yeah.
and so it had it hasn't felt quite ripe yet. So I'm kind of waiting for that, and in conversation with Sarah and some other kind of people were advising us on leading Brooklyn Zen Center. We're kind of like, let's continue to wait for a little bit. And so,
What do you think about, like, say more about the culture shift thing? That's interesting. How do you see that?
well, I feel like, well, partially that there's that people are doing something in Doksan that's different from what everybody else is doing in Doksan, and that then there's also that, like, with the koans, like, you're in this kind of, you're in this linear progression or a
Hmm.
sequence, right? And so then you have a place there, and that's something we don't really have right now. And so there are certain kinds of comparisons kind of just, they don't really have a lot. There's not really a big place for them to land. Whereas, like, koan practice gives a place for comparing mind to really, like, you know, they're there, I'm here. Why are they so far ahead? Or why am I so far ahead? And um, and then potentially, like, and some of the things that can activate, which maybe it's good to have, things like jealousy or pride or arrogance, or get activated. They're but yeah, and I think also, like, and another concern just I have is about secrecy, and just this vivid experience of, not in the context of koan practice, just in the context of basically of teacher misconduct, like teachers putting basically kind of like absolute demands on students for secrecy because they were doing misconduct, and then and the students being, part of the harm of the students being the secrecy,
Hmm.
and then kind of, and so feeling like, oh, in some ways I kind of just would like it to be that what the student brings is confidential, what the teacher does is not, it's not, and it can be shared. But then if we're doing koan work, some of what the teacher's sharing can't be shared, and
Right.
I can't, and then I can't compare, like, is the teacher treating me the same as you or not, for like the same response or different responses, or things like this, like,
Yeah.
and then and so that's a concern I have. Yeah.
Yeah. We work with that, as we say, things are not confidential, but they're private. So it's, it would just be something you could share, but if it's private, you would share it with discretion,
Yeah.
and with reflection. And
Yeah.
so you could talk to someone near and dear about something, but of course, not about the koan answers.
Yeah.
We do in our forums on the Vine, we let people talk about their process.
Yeah.
And the norm is not to disclose the koan you're on, because then it's, people do, though. And sometimes we attend to the issue and sometimes we don't. But
Yeah.
especially if you kind of know, then you can understand where they're at by what they're talking about. So, and I think it does triggers a sense of competition a little bit,
Yeah.
but I think it's a mostly helpful. You know,
Hmm.
it's mostly helpful that to realize that what's possible in the practice.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, I think in the practice, when I was practicing with James Ford, sometimes somebody they just be wandering around with one of the koan collections, and it's like,
I thought of that too when
I
you were
guess
talking
that's
about
what's
that.
when you're on.
Yeah.
You're in there
We did a
somewhere.
sashimi there at the same time. I bet we're thinking of the same guy carrying the book. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, and no, I think, we've been through a lot at Brooklyn Zen Center in the last few years, and so I think at this point we're uh, I feel like we're still kind of regathering just the basic, or just our fundamental practice, and just really, I think this like emphasis on just like intimate body mind practice is what we need right now, and kind of
Mhm.
develop some more solid ground, and then if that starts to feel good, like maybe start offering this to a few people.
Mhm. How about, in terms of the Buddhist worldview, let's say, or the kind of a basic Buddhist context for practice and for koan practice. Do you think that's important or not? Let me just say, what I see happening a lot is koan practice being basically taped on top of a kind of Western progressive worldview. There's nothing, of course, wrong with the progressive Western worldview, but it's different than the worldview of the Buddha Dharma, three realms, karma, rebirth, these fundamental elements of what has been the Buddha Dharma, people kind of picking and choosing what they believe and then dropping a koan into that.
Yes.
What do you think of that issue?
I I I I I kind of have like a, well, with kind of like let the flowers bloom as they will, and like see, and then see how these things play out. But I kind of, my own feeling is, I don't actually want people to believe Buddhist teachings. I don't have that as an agenda, I would say. I want people to kind of have some sense of understanding of them.
Yeah.
But I do feel like the context of Bodhisattva vow, actually, I feel like I, for me, that's and again, like, not that you need to have a given rise to bodhicitta to do koan work, but that doing koan work would happen in the context of like reciting verses and doing ceremonies and making expressing like interest, curiosity, and then eventually commitment to these bodhisattva vows. Like, I don't want to do koan practice separate from that inquiry around
Well, and
aspiration.
that pulls everything together, doesn't it? I mean, the Bodhisattva vows, karma, rebirth,
Yeah,
the vow to realize Buddha. I mean, it kind of picks up everything.
yeah.
But what, you wouldn't require bodhicitta? I mean, like, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that I feel like people come to practice. I think often with a kind of, I came to practice like, I, you know, I want to be free. I don't know about all these other beings. Yeah,
I see what
I
you mean.
didn't have like a bodhisattva heart when I came
You
to
had a
practice.
Sravaka heart,
That
and
Yeah, I
yeah, I
had a
think
Shavaka heart when I came to
that's
practice.
common. Yeah, me too.
But then I, but then, but basically, actually, this is one of the reasons I value Tassajara. Like, it turned my Shravaka heart into a bodhisattva heart, and I think that partially was like communal ritual forms of like reciting bodhisattva vows like multiple times every day, right?
Mhm.
And
It has
that,
an impact.
yeah, I think it has a big impact, and really appreciate that. And
Hmm.
so, uh, I kind of feel that it can be like, I mean, I feel like a kind of colonial mindset can manifest as like, well, oh, there's something. I'll pick out zazen, or I'll pick out koan work. I don't care about. I don't like that other stuff, and so I just leave that over there. And but I kind of feel like, I don't think zazen is zazen without like bodhisattva vow and precepts and communal ritual, and
Hmm.
yeah.
I'm glad you said that. I completely agree with about the colonial mindset. It's like, as we were talking about recently, it's kind of like we're Americans and we know better, you know. We'll tell you what Buddhism is.
Yeah.
We've been at it for 10 years and
Yeah.
we know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's American arrogance. Colonialism, I think, fits too. How about the case? You share the
Yes.
case with us.
Yes. All right. Ditsong asked Master Shushan Ju, "Where are you coming from?" Shushan said, "Coming from the south." Ditsong said, "How is the Buddha Dharma doing in the south these days?" Shushan said, "Discussed extensively." Ditsong asked, "How does that compare to us farming and eating lots of rice?" Shushan said, "How can one help the three worlds?" Ditsong said, "What do you call the three worlds?"
Yeah, I love discussed extensively. Here we are. Who are we to judge? Yeah. So, what do you think are the big points, key points of the
um,
koan here?
well, I think one is this dynamic of of extensive discussion, and this sort of versus this sort of like, just planting the fields, growing rice, eating the rice, or kind of like, talking versus doing, maybe like thinking and understanding versus action and enactment.
Mhm.
And but actually, for me, actually, I think, you know well, today, the kind of the dynamic that's really alive for me is these two questions of how do you help the world, and what do you call the world.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, between like, I kind of hear how do you help the world as being like bodhisattva vow, and kind of like, and then potentially like extending it to like what am I doing and for other people, and this and suffering, and like, or like, what is my activism, and then this other side of just like ordinary daily affairs, and like, and zazen, um and like, like, or kind of like one like a love for all beings, and a kind of boundless compassion, and then like just the people I meet today, how am I showing up with them,
Mm-hmm.
like, that my love, actually I could have a boundless love, an unbounded compassion and regard, and then I'm always just having very limited particular interactions, mostly with my family, people I meet on the street, people I'm at the gym with, people in the sangha, um, and so that, yeah, that kind of dynamic, and that I think like, I'm kind of interested. I maybe more interested in like, not uh, not hierarchizing, not making a hierarchy, and not resolving, but kind of letting that be a tension of inquiry, that I want to hold both of these questions and let them enliven each other without resolving either one of them. I don't feel like they're questions that I could resolve more than 1 minute at a time, and so it's like I
The two questions being, how
uh,
can one help the three worlds, and
yeah,
what do you call the three worlds?
yeah.
Yeah.
What is the three worlds, or and yeah, yeah.
Well, and with some possibility of hierarchizing, as you said it so well. You said the word, making into a hierarchy. There is, though, in the Buddha Dharma, a hierarchy of the types of help, of types of compassion, right? So there's, kind of a common karuna of having empathy and just doing good stuff for people, which I think generally regarded in the Buddha Dharma is like hopeless, because the amount of suffering is infinite. So if you just focus on that, you just burn out. So there's also, bodhisattva compassion, Buddhist compassion, these forms of great compassion. So is the koan, what is the koan? Is the koan like talking about how can I help my neighbor who's out of town and I go get his mail? I mean, is that what it's talking about?
I feel like for me, I would want that to be embraced by this koan. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, and well, or I feel like, uh, I might do a small act of kindness with a very limited understanding, but that small act of kindness is still an enactment of ultimate truth, and and that ultimate truth is more real in the world through an act of kindness than an act of harm.
Well, for sure.
And and so it's and so I want, yeah, I want, I want I want to embrace small acts of kindness as enactments of emptiness.
But
And
are they? But
I
are they
feel
necessarily that, I guess?
well, I feel like I feel like they enact, yeah, I feel like they do enact, I feel like they enact connection,
Mm-hmm.
they enact relationality, they enact emptiness. Whether, even if I'm totally caught in my head, I'm still doing this enactment um, that would be supportive to me being less caught in my head. Whereas the opposite of doing harm is it's enacting separation, enacting delusion, and
Yeah.
it is conducive to me staying caught in grasping, and having other people be caught in their grasping, and a kind of very, discouraging universe.
Well, there is, harm and then doing good, but I'm interested in what doing good really is,
Mm.
and how can we really help? You know, there's going to be more mail for my neighbor tomorrow, but I mean that doesn't mean I'm not going to go get his mail. But how can is the vow asking us to benefit people in this kind of conventional way, or is it, or does the vow, um, you know, require awakening and then benefiting people in terms of helping them wake up?
Well, I guess I guess I don't want to see those as oppositional. So I want to I would say for me my understanding of the vow is it's benefiting beings in all ways and addressing all forms of suffering. And then I feel like as a Soto Zen teacher, I I particularly specialize in this like in like what are the practices of like spiritual transformation and awakening.
Mm.
I don't have medical expertise. I'm not a therapist.
Mm.
Although I think I think our suffering when it's happening and our liberate, it's all mixed up. So it's like I think any suffering can have spiritual suffering can intertwine with my physical suffering or my emotional suffering. Although those are distinct, they are also distinct. And
Mm.
so I feel like that's my specialty. But I feel like it's also non-separate from like address that addressing other forms of suffering. And I kind of also just feel this in my life. I kind of feel like I feel this question of what can you do about the world. I For me I or what can I do about ICE, or what can I do about the war in Iran. I I feel like I don't see it as a question to resolve. I want that to be part of my life. And then also this, but then what do you call the world? Is the world out there? Is what do you call the self? Like what are we in this world?
Mm.
I really like that you were kind of more literal, I think, than the other translations I've seen in translating triple world or three worlds.
Yeah.
And yeah, because I feel like that in some ways it's for me I might hear world in a kind of objectifying way of the world as a container world.
Yeah.
When we say three worlds, or in kind of the Abhidharma context, three worlds would be worlds of beings,
Yeah.
because the formless beings don't have a physical world.
Right.
So it's like, and so that's kind of for me that's kind of clarifying. This is about beings.
Yeah. I like that you said specialty, and especially for a Zen practitioner or a Zen teacher. I think, yeah, that's the question. I think Kadagiri Roshi would say the same thing, that you know that and in those days, like the nuclear freeze was a big issue, and we had a session about it at Zen Center, Minnesota Zen Center, and it's like, yeah, he said, but what I do, this, I know he might have used the word specialty, but something else maybe. Anyway, my focus is this. This is what we're doing here as a Buddhist center. Not that it's opposed to this, but it's just my area of expertise is in helping people in this specific way. So yeah, so we have this line from the verse, to a couple lines, I guess. Planting fields, cooking rice, the matter of everyday life, as you've been highlighting. Not eating until full, you don't know. Only if you've eaten until full do you fully know that there's nothing to seek. What do you say about that?
Yeah, well, when I hear nothing to seek, and eating till full, I guess I'm hearing kind of like I've fully acquainted myself with my true nature, and I've kind of integrated that acquaintance, or integrated that intimacy, I would say, into my life. This is not something I've done. This is like I'm just I'm chipping away. But yeah, that's how I would hear it. Is like a kind of we are true nature, but then how is that integrated into like my experience and my activity, expression?
I hear some here that in this line that is contrary to the contemporary Soto narrative. That only until you've eaten until full do you know that there's nothing to seek. I mean, you
Mm.
often hear there's nothing to say. Well, Tenzin Roshi's recent book, isn't that the title? Or I hadn't thought about that, but isn't that his
Yeah, yeah,
recent book,
definitely.
Nothing to Gain or something?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and of course it's true, but can you leap over the process of really
Yeah.
eating until full?
Yeah. I well from what I've seen of the book, he's saying no.
Yeah,
He's very much affirming you need a process. Like
yeah, I'm sure. Yeah,
because we suffer. We're
yeah.
suffering and we need a process of actualizing our true nature.
Mm.
And yeah, yeah, I really feel that.
Um, one other question that stands out for me here, and what I had planned is the issue of householder practice and koan work, especially in the context of eating until full. I mean, and as we were talking before we started recording, it seems that Dawei, was instrumental in focusing at least the koan method and had householders largely in mind in doing that. But I wonder if you think that's true today. Can householders, you did a whole bunch of practice periods of Tassajara, can householders, realize this mind is Buddha within their householder lives?
Well, I feel like
And I guess is koan method supportive of that? If so,
well, I actually well so then yeah well there and then there's different koan methods. So it's because I yeah, as we were talking before, I kind of feel like this Dahui's approach of like this intense of becoming a great mass of doubt. My feeling is I don't see that as so compatible with daily doings. I see it as kind of a retreat practice, where you 24/7 doubt and like any and being scrupulous. Like any attempt to resolve the doubt is like is you know
mm-hmm. Conceptually, you mean
that
resolve
released.
the doubt conceptually?
Yeah, any attempt to resolve the doubt, any strategy to create doubt,
Mm-hmm.
drop it. And so I think it kind of needs to be relentless to become if you're going to become a complete mass of doubt. And because our patterns are so deep not to cultivate doubt, and it's and it's radically a very uncomfortable type kind of practice. So uh, yeah, yeah, and so but then the kind of the koan practice and this kind of like that developed in Japan with the Rinzai and then Diamond Sangha in the United States and so on. I feel like there's something really I feel like there's something deeply compatible about koan inquiry with daily life, and that koans can weave into my life, um, and partially how I like that actually is that I feel like one of the I feel like the koans like are this like they're like this sutra of Zen, like the core of Zen teaching, and then and then and so different types of Zen go back to the koans and do different things with koans, and so like Daweis is one way, and then like this contemporary Rinzai is another way. But then I think part of all of them is also just that koans they're indeterminate, and they could live with they could kind of breathe into your life in ways that are kind of new unfoldings. And it kind of feels like Dogen, right? Like Dogen's doing kind of his own wild creative things with some of these koans, and and the it says like the koan's a starting place for him, but then it's like it gets to be this like he's in relationship to the koan, but it's also like he's very much doing himself,
Mm-hmm.
and doing his unfolding his own kind of vision and practice with the story. And I feel like koans are wonderful for that, and they don't pin too much down, so they give you there's a lot of freedom and room for a creative something to happen. And in that sense I feel like koans can go wonderfully into daily life.
So
um,
you're saying yes, but there seems to be a but.
I don't know if there's a well
Okay.
the but well or the well then there's this other question that lurking, or in I hear another question in your question about kind of lay versus monastic training or practice, and like what's possible. And I guess I I I think I feel like I guess one thing I might say that's maybe you know is that maybe awakening. I don't necessarily see awakening as being one thing, and so like how awakening could live might have many faces or many dimensions or something or many depths, and then I feel like and so then for any particular person, some of those might be more supported by lay or monastic, but I don't know if there's universals actually, and so I think some people like can do great stuff in the monastery, but there's other things that won't happen, and vice versa, right? And in some ways, I think it's great if you can have both, and and that and that but I kind of I feel some people get caught in feeling like my lay practice isn't real because it's not monastic training, which is real,
Hmm.
and so I kind of like when I see people caught in that, I'm like, oh, I don't really want to support that. I don't want to feed that. I don't want to be
Yeah,
complicit in that kind of comparing,
right.
which is actually self-denigrating, right? And so it's like it's not appreciating like your own true nature and its potential right here. And so that's kind of what I feel as a teacher. I'm trying to support people, and so now I'm in a lay context. So I'm kind of this is what I'm working with. I'm not a teacher from in a monastic context,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, I was too.
I'd be a different human being if I was.
Mhm.
Like,
I've been thinking about it in terms of it's more important like what you do than what people call it,
mm,
monastic or whether, priest or householder, especially outside of a monastic container, it's pretty much the same thing. So, we have these two different labels, but if priests are doing something that's different lifestyle wise, what they're actually doing, then does it matter so much what we call it? Yeah.
I feel like I mean I treasure my monastic training. I
Mm-hmm.
mean I just loved it, and I mean and I loved how difficult it was for me and how, all the challenges it put me through, and that it's relentless and it's relational, and that lay practice you just it's just not part of it. It's not the setup. It's not a setup like that, uh, and so I feel like that's a but I don't want to necessarily get into better or worse, or I also feel like having a child and having children, they're amazing teachers. You know, sometimes I think sometimes children teachers can teach you things that no other teacher can teach you, and yeah,
Maybe one last thing about koan work, this particular koan or other koans.
mm, um, mm. I guess for me, when I call it a koan, or when Zen calls something a koan, I'm hearing it say like you can't get this with thinking,
Hmm.
and so uh, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to
What do you think about that?
yeah, how are you going to work with that? How are you going to
Yeah.
work with this koan? And 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 kind of and I I really like kind of like that embodied awareness. There's a like I kind of feeling embodied awareness itself as like a form of inquiry, and that a koan can kind of weave into embodied awareness, um, and kind of coming into intimacy with self and other, and that koans are kind of like they can weave into that in a really beautifully productive way,
Mhm.
and yeah, and that anything, and if you call it a koan, hopefully that's going to be a productive interweaving, and and so yeah, we could be. I would like. I would. Yeah. I want to be careful what I call a koan.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. So, speaking of saying goodbye, beyond thinking, would you like to join me in shaking out your sleeves and going?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.